All right, guys, what's going on? Andre with AndreReese.Biz. All right, guys, I'm out here. I'm going to talk to you guys real quick today about a couple topics real quick. I'm going to talk to you about how I meet the quintessential definition of being a scrub. So I'll take that. I'll own that. I might talk about a little bit about the Diddy update, but I'm really here today to talk about never lying to your kids is probably the best position that you can kind of take. So before I start all that, man, I am a spoiled and blessed individual. I don't have to go to work at all in the physical sense. I don't have to get up in the morning and get in the car and drive. And so, here, let me show you guys this real quick. So, let me flip the camera around here real fast. All right, you guys can see? All right, look at that. We got snow on the ground everywhere out here. It's beautiful. I'm telling you, man. And I'm not one of these people that got to get up today and go try to drive and get to work out here in the snow. So I'm blessed enough to be able to stay at home and work and do my thing. And so I figured, hey, you know what? I got to go to the post office. It's supposed to be open, rain, sleet, snow. Doesn't make a difference. I'm not familiar with driving in the snow. I don't want to try to figure it out today. I'm not even sure if they even salted the roads. Maybe they did a little bit. I don't know. But it looks pretty icy. I don't want to be the one to try it out here today. So I bought some brand new boots. I don't know if I can scan down to them or not, but you guys can see these. So this is the new addition to my cold weather arsenal that I have. And I bought these boots on Amazon during Black Friday. I paid like $43 for them. They're fur lined, they're waterproof, water resistant, they're warm. So I was like, let me go ahead and go for a walk down to the post office and drop off this mail. So that's what I'm doing right now. So this is something, and the mail is work related. It's related to the business. You know, so some of the sales I have of items that have sold recently on eBay, plus some other mail I got to drop off also as well. Take a look down that way right there. So I figured, hey, what the heck? Let me pretend like I'm an ordinary working guy and come out here and hit these streets and commute myself to a work location, which is the post office. So here we go. I'm gonna go ahead and give this a shot and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, man, I'm having a great time out here in Richmond, Virginia, and getting a little bit of exercise this morning. You can hear above me right now is the freeway. So, and just walking. So let me get past this little thing right here. I don't know how I guess I got to go out in the street. But, and I'll tell you, my first topic I was going to talk to you guys about is, you guys all remember the song from TLC, No Scrubs? I'll tell you what, man, this is beautiful over here. Let me show you guys this real quick. Wow. I'll tell you, when I come back, I'm gonna take a bunch of pictures and stuff. But look at that. That is amazing, you know? But like I said, I fit the quintessential definition of a scrub. If you go back to the late 80s song by TLC, it might have came out in the early 90s. I'm not sure, I didn't look it up. But I don't have a car. And actually, if it wasn't for me moving out here to Richmond, and when we got into a relationship, me and my wife, I had vowed not to ever buy a house again. So, you know, when you have good credit and you got a couple dollars in the bank, you know, at some point if you change your mind, it's not too hard to buy a house. You know, I think this was probably the easiest home purchase I've had in my life. Oh, shit. Okay, my brother fell. This is black ice. Okay. All right, I'm okay. All systems check. All right, I'm good. So let me just penguin it. Whew. All right. So, hey, the only way you could find this out is get out here on these streets and try it out. So I hit a patch of ice, and that's what I'm telling you. I don't want to be out here and hit a patch of ice while I'm, here, hang on a second here. Here, hang on one second. All right, went ahead and pulled my hat off. I'm getting a little hot. So I don't want to be out here in the car and all of a sudden go sliding and can't stop. So you guys got to witness my first crash, and I've developed now an algorithm to know that when I see ice and there's no snow, to take it easy, because there's a good chance that I can go down and fall. So I've seen some crazy falls on TikTok and YouTube of people that have bit it. I'm glad I didn't do it. I'm cool. The camera's cool. So we're just out here making it do what it do. So let me take it easy here. All right, this is the street part. So Marilyn said, walk like a penguin if things get a little challenging. So good advice. All right, so let me get back to it. So I am, like I said, a scrub. I didn't own a home before. And when I left California and came out this way, when we were locking our relationship down, I was about ready to propose to Marilyn. I sold my car. Okay, this looks a little challenging here. I sold my car in the Bay Area. The day before I left, I sold it at CarMax, and I kept it moving. So here I am out here in Richmond, Virginia. At this very moment, I'm acting like I am a scrub. So I have access to a car. You know, I use Marilyn's car all the time, you know, when I need to. And, you know, I had talked to her initially before about moving here and bringing my car. And I felt like I needed to bring it, needed to ship it. I wasn't going to drive it or nothing like that. And she was like, you know what? There's no reason for you to have a car. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know. She said, well, think about it. All this year that you've been coming out here, how many times have you honestly needed a car and you weren't able to use mine? I'm like, you know, you're right, baby. I don't need a car. So I sold it, and kind of in the background after I let it go, I was kind of like, well, shoot, I'm waiting for a time where I was like, you know what? And people do this all the time when it comes to their storage units. They say, hey, you know, I'm gonna pay all this money every month to keep these items in the storage. That way, when it comes time and I need it, I can go get it. So that's not the case here with the car. I got rid of my car in April of last year, and I think I'm coming up on 9 months without a car. And I'll tell you what, I have zero regrets that I got rid of my car. So I'd encourage you guys, if you live in an area that's walkable, that has everything that you need, you guys work from home, there's not really any reason to have multiple cars. And I'll tell you, the car we have is an electric car. We can plug it in the wall and charge it up at home at 110. We drive maybe total between us, together and separately, roughly about 6,000 miles a year. That's not a lot. That's like, what, 500 miles a month? So maybe 125 a week. And we have a number of times that we run up to DC or we go on longer trips. So our actual weekly mileage is actually a lot less than that. So like I said, I am a scrub. I don't own a car. Up until April of this year, I didn't own a house, but I'll tell you what, there's nothing wrong with being a scrub. And if you are utilizing your resources for other purposes, and here, hang on a second. Was a song by TLC very telling of an epidemic? Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure. But on my end here, I have no car, and I meet the classic definition of being a scrub. So are there any lessons here to be learned? Anything business-wise, life-wise? Yeah, of course. You got to take everything and everybody on a case-by-case basis if you're out here in this dating world. There's some obvious things that all of us should have at a certain point in our life, but you have to, a lot of times, look at the options and the reasons why people do what they do and see if they're valid, or if it's not, if somebody's pulling smoke over your eyes. And I have a lot of people all the time out here say, hey, are you going to get a car? I'm like, no, I mean, there's really no reason for me to, and it's not like one of those things where it's like, hey, you're a crummy person, you don't have a car, are you going to get a car? It's more just a general inquiry. And I'm like, you know what? I think about it sometimes, and if I ended up buying a car, I would probably buy a Tesla Model Y and then just go with that, but there's really no reason. And then sometimes I'll see something come up, like I see these, what are those spider things? A lot of the brothers drive those. I said, hey, I would love to have one of those, sit it in the driveway, and then jump into it every once in a while and go out. But realistically, there is no reason for me to have a car, so I don't. And with me getting ready to start the DJ Black Banana business next year and get out here and hit the road, the question is, am I going to buy a car to haul around equipment? The answer is no. So here, let me show you guys this real quick. All right, you guys see that? That is just beautiful. The snow. Man. So, yeah, so back to DJ Black Banana business. Am I gonna buy a car? No. What I figured I'm gonna do is every time I need to take all my equipment to a gig, I'll go down the street to one of the rental companies and buy a larger SUV and then take that out on the road. And that will be my vehicle of choice. And will there ever be a point in the future where I'll buy a vehicle? I don't think so, because I'm at the point now where we're trying to keep our lives super simple and keep our expenditures as low as possible. And if there's no reason to, de-scrubify myself, I'm not going to do it at all. And we're lucky because we live in an area where we can get to stuff and walk to stuff if we need to, which is fantastic and wonderful. And if I need to do that, I'm going to do that. So, goddamn, I'll tell you what, I'm out here walking in this snow, and I got to be careful crossing the street. I am getting hot. So I'm wondering if I'm going to start freezing icicles on myself. So let me take it easy through here, just to be safe crossing the street. It is a little icy, especially here in this spot. Hang on a second, I don't want to fall. Just take it easy. So I think if I go out walking in the future, if it's fresh snowfall, yeah, I'm going to do that. But if it's later in the day and things are kind of icy, I'm going to avoid having to fall again. So that's what the goal here is. So yeah, so like I said, no reason at all to buy a car. and don't think I will anytime. If something happens with the car we have now, we'll buy a new car together, you know, but, you know, all the things have lined up correctly for me not to even have one, so I don't. So that's it. That's it on that topic. So yeah, I proudly claim the prize, and I recognize that I am a scrub by the classic definition of TLC. If I was out here with my homeboys, I would be hanging out their window of their ride trying to say, hey, I'm AndreReese.Biz. I do taxes. You want my card? So I'll just leave it at that right there. Let me get up here on the snow. This looks a little icy. So here, hang on a second. All right. And so I'm pretty close to the post office. Let me adjust this up here. Getting there. You guys can still see, looking really good. So there's a few cars out here on the streets. A lot of them are four-wheel drives, you know. Can't get mad, can't salt on that. So, but yeah, so that's it. That's all I'm gonna say about the TLC scrub. Here, hang on, let me make sure I make it okay here. There's some black ice. And I'll tell you, when we lived at our other place, I did see somebody outside running, and I saw them take a pretty big biff. So I should have known better. Okay, so the second topic, I think I said P. Diddy. So this whole P. Diddy thing continues to expand more and more and more and more and more. It is fantastic and sensational to watch all this. And, you know, I went back and watched my video that I recorded, and I also watched a number of different topics that people, or videos that people have actually recorded. And so I think a lot of people out there right now, what they're talking about is how diabolical Diddy was. Yeah, all good, we get that. Not a lot of people, and they're talking about the different things that have taken place in the video, you know, back and forth, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, all good, so we all get that. And so I don't think a lot of people have gone into anything beyond that breakdown of things where they talk about, you know, the obvious things that are inside of the video. So kind of find out now, I think I said before, I did not know why 50 had such beef for Diddy. I guess there's a number of different reasons. At one point, I guess Diddy's baby mama, she actually went and started hanging out with Diddy and was going to the parties and all that good stuff. And so that's enough to push a man to the brinks. But I think the other thing that was happening too is there's always a mention of, I think Diddy and 50 were on a talk show. It might have been Ellen or something, and he offered to take him shopping. So I think out of the two things, you know, I think the one that's probably the most difficult probably for a man to really truly try to process is when another cat takes your girl. So I would have to err on the side of saying that's probably the real reason, or part of the strong reason why 50 decided to take this attack on him. And I'll tell you, it's one of those things where it's hard for a fella when you're out here in the dating world and you find somebody that you really like and you really care about. You go out of your way to provide them with the best part inside of you as possible, and they don't appreciate it. So, and then come to find out somebody that hasn't put in the same amount of work, as you have, and the same amount of energy and effort, gets to enjoy that person with little to minimal investment. And that may have been what happened here with 50 Cent. So I'm not sure. I'm just speculating on that. But I tell people, I'm actually pretty close to the post office here. So I tell people all the time, when it comes to being in a relationship, you got to make sure people that aren't happy, you can't do anything in this world to make them happy if they're not already happy. And so there's nothing you can buy, there's nothing you can give them, there's nothing you can show them, there's no amount of money you can spend on them that will cause them to appreciate you back. And if somebody doesn't like you, they're not going to be able to respect you, and they're not going to be able to appreciate you. So is this what happened to 50 here? I don't know. It seems a little suspect that it could be part of the driving force behind it, but I don't know these guys. I haven't sat down and had a talk with him at all. It's only what the street says. So you guys got to kind of speculate. But like I said, pretty much all this stuff out here that I talk about, especially controversial topics, there's always a side of everything that I'm talking about, that is designed to make you think and look at the situation and determine if there's a lesson that can be learned from this. And so if that's the case here, what I'm talking about, the lesson applies to both men and the women, that if you really appreciate somebody a lot, you love and respect them, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do the same thing back. And no matter what you do for them, no matter what you give for them, no matter what you provide for them, and all the effort you put into giving them your best version of yourself, there's no reason that's going to stop them, especially if they don't feel the same about you, from going out and giving the best parts of themselves to somebody else that hasn't paid the price and been there and paid the dues. So that's a lesson to be learned. And I think it's one of those things where, when you go and do something like this, it's also easy for somebody to turn around one day and do the same thing back to you. So I hope that 50's background is clean and pure, because somebody can turn around and do the same type of hit piece on him as he's done on Diddy. So does it make what Diddy did right or wrong? Absolutely not. I'm not going to even speculate that. We know what happened. We know the diabolical nature of the things that he's been accused of, what he has been found guilty of, etc. But all we can do here is look at how these things could potentially apply to us. So in the end, I say, hey, be careful. Make sure you surround yourself with people that reciprocate the way you, provide effort and energy to them, and make sure that you find people that are already happy, that already have their stuff together, because like I said, there's nothing you can do by, say, purchase them, give them, that's going to make them like and appreciate you. Here, I'm gonna go ahead and try to cross the street here. Like and appreciate you if they just don't. So remember that. And so that's it for that topic. So the last thing, and this relates to Christmas time and the holidays, and I tell you all the time, this is kind of a funny story. I don't believe in lying to kids, and so I realize a lot of things are, in fables and fairy tales, and they have hidden lessons in them and all that. But the way I see it is, like with my daughter, I never lied to her at all. And this kind of reminds me of a funny story. So so let me just say this. There's always this debate, especially if you have young kids. They're trying to determine if there really is a Santa Claus. So that's it. This time of year, the debate always comes up. And if you control your child's environment, meaning that you don't have them around other kids, especially older kids, you can pretty much tell them whatever you want. And so the problem comes when your kid gets around other kids, and let me check over here real quick. Your kid gets around other kids, and the other kids start to say the opposite of what you've been telling your child all along. So a good example of that is if you talk about Santa Claus and Christmas, and you know, and let me just say this, there is a Santa Claus. So if there's any kids on here trying to check it out and see if there really is a Santa Claus, there absolutely is, you know. But Santa also has, if there's a spirit of Santa Claus, and Santa Claus also has a ton of people that help him do what he needs to do, because he can't do it all himself. And they manifest themselves in visible ways as well as invisible ways. So when my daughter was little, you know, it was told, she became very much aware just from watching Disney and everything else that there is Santa Claus. And of course, you know, you get coloring books when you're little, and you draw little pictures of Santa Claus. You tell the child to go to sleep so Santa can bring the gifts out. So my daughter she's always been very inquisitive. And then when she was little, you had access to, at least they did, they had access to YouTube where they can, you know, YouTube a video and check it out and stuff. I remember my daughter was asking me one time, she says, "Dad, is there a Santa Claus?" I said, "Yes." She says, "Well, who is Santa Claus?" I said, "I'm Santa Claus." And she's like, "No, you're not." I said, "Amber, I am Santa Claus. I'm Santa Claus. I am Santa Claus." And I said, the North Pole is Amazon, and you know, there's a number of different stores around where you can buy items from, whether it's Target or Walmart or, you know, whatever it might be, where there you can buy items to help Santa get his job done. And so she, of course, like, "No, you're wrong." I said, "Look, Amber, I am Santa Claus." And out at the time in Brentwood, there was a facility that Amazon built not too far from where we lived at, and we drove by it one day. It was right by the bridge, and I said, "Well, hey, there's the North Pole over there." She's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Let's go take a look." And we drove up. It was Amazon. I said, "This is where all the toys and stuff are kept for Santa Claus, and this is where he ends up getting dispatched." You know, and so she was like, "No, I don't believe you." And then I remember her going to school, and she had an elf on the shelf, and I would move it around, you know, that way she can have the full experience. And I remember her coming home from school, it was maybe first grade or something like that. She was like, "Elf on the shelf isn't real." And I said, "Well, what are you talking about, Amber?" She says, "You know, some of the kids at school, they were talking about how Elf on the shelf isn't real, and it's just the parents that move it around." I said, "Well, what do you believe?" She says, "Well, I think the Elf on the shelf is real." And I said, "Well, Elf on the shelf is real." You know, what's the issue? What's the problem? And so I think she went and got on YouTube, and she was watching videos about how Elf on the shelf wasn't real. And I also asked her, I said, "So these kids, what are they saying about everything that makes you think that it's not real?" They said, "Well, the parents are the ones that move the elf around." I said, "Okay, that's cool. I get it. It all makes sense." I said, "But you know, it is what it is." I said, "If you think Elf on the Shelf is real, cool. We have an Elf on the Shelf, cool. You know, it's up to you to believe what you want to believe, but regardless of what you believe, I am Santa Claus." So she's like, "No, you're not." Yeah, I said, "Okay, cool, whatever, cool, whatever." And so I think by the time my daughter, you know, as she got older, you know, she would, each year that would come by up to the point, I think maybe third or fourth grade it was, that we'd always have these discussions, and I'd always point back how I was the Easter Bunny. I also told her that I was Santa Claus, and any other type of holiday that took place, that I utilized the tools and technology that was available to be able to fulfill these things. And she didn't necessarily believe me at all. So I'm like, "Okay, Amber, it's cool. I get it." So I think what I'm gonna try to do, I'm gonna try to find the picture and put it on here. But there was a year, I think she was probably 8 or 9 years old. I think it was probably closer to 9. She was probably in 4th grade. That year, she got a bunch of stuff for Christmas. And, you know, I utilized the tools and technology that most of us Santa's helpers use, you know. And I went and bought a bunch of stuff from her, from Walmart, from Target, and from Amazon. And for whatever reason, a lot of it didn't fit, or she didn't want it, or she got a duplicate from somebody else, because she would get a lot of toys because she was young. And so I was like, oh, okay. So she's like, well, what are we going to do about all this stuff? I said, well, you know, Amazon accepts returns for Santa. I said, Walmart does also, so does Target. And I said, so does Costco. So you can actually go to the authorized return center and return those items. You can get money back. You can go buy something else. Santa Claus is cool with all that. So she's like, okay, cool. So we ended up going, I loaded up the car with all these different things to return. We went to Walmart. And at the time, I think she had an iPad or something. So whenever we would go ride in the car, she'd take her iPad with her and she'd be playing with it, learning games or reading or whatever it might be. And so I'm in line. It's right after the holiday, so the line is long at Walmart. And what I ended up doing was, once they called me to the front, and I gave them my receipts, and I actually put all the things on the counter for them, and then I gave the receipts. And then they ended up processing them, scratching them off one by one, and they ended up giving me a credit back to my card. And then while we were standing there, Amber stopped, and she looked at me, and then she looked down at the receipts. Then she looked at me, then she looked down at the receipts, and I said to myself, uh-oh. And she grabbed one of the receipts and like turned away so that I couldn't grab it from her. And she looked at the receipt, and she saw the other stuff that she got that was gifts from Santa on the receipt that wasn't being returned. Then she grabbed another receipt, then she grabbed another receipt, and she saw all the different things that were on there. And at that particular point, the lady was done. I'm walking away, I'm kind of like giggling, and she's like, all the other stuff that Santa brought me is on these receipts. And I was like, I told you I'm Santa Claus. She says, no, you're not. I said, yes, I am. I've always told you that I'm Santa Claus. And so she had the shock of her life when she realized that the two things both aligned. And I'm walking out the store trying to get away from her, and she's walking behind me trying to catch up with me. And then we get in the car, and she's like, Dad, you told me that there was a Santa Claus and then there's no Santa Claus. I said, Amber, I've never ever told you that. I've always told you that I was Santa Claus. And she says, so it's true, there isn't a Santa. I said, Amber, there is a Santa Claus. I said, there's the spirit of Santa Claus that exists, you know, and you are very much aware of that. And I told you all along, Amazon is where the North Pole is, and all these other things about, you know, the Santa and all that. And I said, so she was getting mad at me and angry because she felt like I had lied. I said, Amber, I've never lied to you at all. I've always told you I was Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. So after that, I think she kind of sat in the car, because we might have been in the car driving to Costco, which took a little while. And then she finally started talking to me. She says, so if there's no Santa Claus, what? I said, there is a Santa Claus. There's the spirit of Santa Claus. She says, okay, if Santa did not specifically bring me these gifts, what am I supposed to do now? I said, nothing changes. I said, nothing changes at all. I said, you will still get gifts. You know, the North Pole is still Amazon. I said, but the problem, I said, the thing you have to realize at this point is, now that you are getting older, you have to also, you can do what the kids have done at your school, where they went around, they said Elf on the Shelf wasn't real. But I said, you have a duty and a responsibility now to not ruin this for anybody else. And so if somebody says, hey, there's no Santa Claus, you can't say that there's not a Santa Claus, because there's a spirit of Santa Claus that exists. And I say, you don't want to go around and hurt little kids' feelings and say things to them that's not necessary. But, you know, in the end, you have a bigger duty and a responsibility. I said, when you're at school now, what do you guys do? Well, and one of the things that they did is they would go and get the kindergartners and the first graders. They'd have a buddy, and then they'd walk hand in hand with them, and they'd go to lunch, or they'd go to chapel or whatever. I said, what you're basically doing is you're using what you've learned already to help other people that need to learn it. So I said, it's an awesome duty and responsibility. And I said, most of the things that happen in this world may or may not be true. I said, there's fairy tales, there's fables, there's stories, there's history. A lot of things may or may not be true. And I said, in your life, you will find that a lot of things that you believe are, and this is where the lesson is. I said, in your life, you will find that a lot of things that you've learned about, been told about, talked about, may or may not be completely 100% true, or you accidentally maybe overinterpreted it to be more than it actually is. And I said, this is not going to be the last time this is going to happen. All you can do at this point is use the information that you have, and don't ruin it for other people that kind of want to still believe that. And everybody in time will have the opportunity to, find out on their own when they're ready. And I said, you're 9 years old now, at least. And I think that is the age I'm talking about. You're at least 9. So you're old enough now to understand and, become part of the process. And so after that, she was cool. She got it. And I think when Easter came, the next holiday, I got an Easter basket and put it by the front door. And so I think she came and brought the Easter basket, was like, this was you, right? I said, hey, you know what? I'm the Easter bunny too. So like I said, the best position in life right now is to not lie to your kids, and I'll even tell you, there was something I was talking to her about politically recently. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but I was telling her, what you have learned is not 100% true. And, more than one thing can be true at a time. And if it is true, that doesn't mean that the other things aren't true or less true or more true. And I said, and sometimes what we've been told, there's variations of things in the middle. So you can't always say one thing is one thing and all the way the other. Sometimes there's variations of color in between. And so after we had a long conversation, it was probably 2 or 3 hours on the phone. And at the end, she was like, just lie to me and tell me that it is the way. No, I said, Amber, I said, I've never lied to you about stuff. I said, you have to, I said, this is not much different than the Santa Claus thing that we kind of went through, where you found out about the spirit of Christmas and the spirit of Santa Claus. And I said, just sit on it and think on it and let your mind work on it. And over time, you'll be able to come up with a realization for where things actually are. So like I said, don't lie to your kids. Tell them the truth. And if it comes, and so if there's a exact opposite where somebody comes to you and they say something, you give them ones and zeros. Yeah, there's gradations of stuff, but in the end, you want to be able to have your kids trust you and believe in you. And when you say something, they can always look back and say, you know what? They were always honest with me about life and things, and there's no reason for them to lie to me now. I believe what I want to believe until it's time for me to believe something else. And all this time, my parent was always honest and straightforward with me about everything. And I think that's probably the best way to approach these problems. So that's it, guys. That's my little story about being a scrub. That's a little story here about talking about Diddy, talking about the snow and Santa Claus. And if you ask me adamantly, Santa Claus is real and he does exist. He just utilizes the spirit and the service of many helpers that are all over the world. And we all have a duty and a responsibility to keep on upholding the spirit of Christmas and holidays and giving. And so never let that ever, discourage you in any kind of way. And I'll tell you, even after my daughter came of age and she figured everything out and she came to a new conclusion, I still would give her gifts that were from Santa. So, because it was easier. I didn't have to wrap them. Because the thing is, Santa is so busy, he doesn't have to wrap gifts. he's got a trillion gifts he's got to deliver around the world, and he doesn't have the capacity to wrap them. So you can just take the stuff and throw it on the ground and take a bite of the cookies and all that, and keep it moving. And I think even after that, you know, we still have cookies that were put out for Santa. I would still, you know, because I know Santa, because he had eaten at so many different places already, I'd go down there and help him out. I'd take a drink of the milk and I would have a bite of the cookies because they were always delicious, you know. So you got to do what you got to do. But that's it, guys. I don't have anything else to talk about. I'm going to go ahead and go into the post office here, drop off my mail real quick. And I've enjoyed, let me just flip this around here for you guys. You guys can see everything out here. It is fantastic and wonderful. It's a winter wonderland. And I'd probably say we got maybe 2 to 3 inches of snow. So just enough to make a big difference, enough to stick today. It's cool out here, so the snow will hang around. And I don't know when I'll be able to ride my bike again. But I know one thing for sure, that fall I took earlier was definitely a huge wake-up call, and a reason why I won't go ride my bike until it's at least in the upper 30s, and then there's no snow or ice on the ground, because I don't want to fall and biff. But I'm fine, I'm doing okay, and there's no issues with me right now. So let me flip this back around here, see if I can do that. So that's it, guys. I'm out. Peace. I appreciate you guys always listening to these ramblages, and it's like I said, I may talk about controversial topics, you know, that are maybe current, that you may have an issue with. It's not for you to sit here and say and think about, hey, what side of the fence does he fall on? It's got nothing to do with that at all. It's a way of looking at these things and applying a thought methodology to determine what you can do to either do the same thing or not do the same thing, and see that there might be a bigger story underneath than there actually is. So that's it, guys. I'm out. Take care. Peace. All right, let me turn this thing off here. All right, I'm out. In my life, oh, shit. Okay, my brother fell. This is black ice. Okay, all right, I'm okay. All systems check. All right, I'm good. So let me just penguin it.